There really are two ways to write an introduction, and the first and most common is the treatise method. This would be the approach followed by someone like Aristotle, very linear, very logical, well thought out, and thorough. It is sort of like outlining a work before you write it. I don't work that way. I work in strange spurts. I have bouts of information, a kind of theomania, Socrates calls it, that is divine madness. Therefore, this work is more like a strange sort of poetry mixed with Aristotelian logic and methodology. And to the degree I do metaphysics. In this strange poetic style, this work is akin to the work of Friedrich Nietzsche, who I consider a frenemy, a friend enemy, or friendly enemy, the way Chesterton considered Shaw, or like Peter Parker, Spider Man, and Harry Osborn. I also comment extensively on both modern and Aristotelian physics through the work. My way of doing an introduction owes itself to a comment of C.S. Lewis's regarding introductions in one of his own introductions. I think it was Mere Christianity, but I could be wrong. Regardless, what he says is I have to write the work first so I know what it is I'm going to introduce. It's sort of like introducing a person. One has to get to know the person first. In the in case the reader can't tell by now, I've substantially written the work. I'm currently in the process of writing the introduction. Since I mentioned the influence of me being an English instructor in this work, I will use that same template for this introduction. The three most critical elements of any written or spoken work are purpose, audience, and tone. I think because people are both emotional and rational, tone tends to have an oversized role in any discursive work. However, I will save my comments on tone for the final paragraph of this introduction and give the reader a breakdown of my intentions in the exact same order: purpose, audience, and tone. First of all, purpose. The purpose of this work is given directly in the first paragraph of the body of my argument. The purpose is to illustrate that belief in God is not a ridiculous proposition, logically or rationally speaking. The atheist reader may, and indeed probably will, scoff at this suggestion. They have heard all the arguments for God, none of them work, etc. However, I invite the atheist reader to suspend their disbelief for the remainder of this work so they can get my overall point before dismissing my argument. The theist reader may cheer at the audacity of my project. He or she, therefore, may not follow my argument closely enough to know that I'm actually trying to engage atheists as well as theists. C'est la vie. That's life. Again, as I state in the very first paragraph of the body of this work, my aim is more modest than convincing the atheist that God exists. My aim is to get the atheist to try and listen to what I consider some of the best arguments and approaches found in Christian theism in the West. If I were a more thorough and more learned on the Christian East, I would use a more self consciously Platonic or Neoplatonic approach rather than a Thomistic Aristotelian approach. I wonder how Palamas would deal with contemporary atheism. It's an interesting question, maybe in the same way David Bentley Hart does. However, I am not extensively trained in the Byzantine apologetics. My training is Latin Roman. As a common objection given by atheists regarding any sort of apologetic attempts to defend theism or God as hopelessly self serving and preaching to the choir, I submit this is bordering on arrogance. First, if in if the first objection out of one's mouth is a psychological rather than a logical one, it seems that we are already lost in the woods. We, atheists and theists alike, really need to suspend our disbelief and do our best to listen to the other side or sides. This is called docility to the truth in the tradition. Second, audience. I think I covered a lot of audience in the prior paragraph. The audience for this book is really anyone who bothers to read it. I am still writing it, as you might be able to tell. Thus, I have no idea how I'm going to market it, spread it around, give it to influencers, theist and atheist. I'm kind of clueless at this point. I would, of course, love it if Sam himself read it and even better if Harris took the argument in it seriously. Sam Harris, or rather his ghost, is my wrestling partner in this work. He's my foil. Good luck with getting Harris to read this, David Hawkes. It will be a cold day in hell when that happens. My response to the good luck, it will be a cold day in hell, is a literary one. In Dante's Inferno, the ninth circle of hell is cold. It contains Satan himself as well as the traitors, Judas Iscariot, Brutus, and Cassius. Sam Harris may indeed be reading my work alongside the devil himself. Thus, my audience is theists and atheists, and pantheists and agnostics alike are welcome to read this work if they bother to look it up or come across it. I include all practitioners of all world religions and include animists on my audience list. This work is for everyone. Third, and in some ways most important, ironically enough for a philosophical work, tone. The tone of this work is self-consciously ironic. Why? Because my two favorite authors and philosophers, Plato and Chesterton, are filled with wit and irony. I realize that G.K. Chesterton is not generally acknowledged as a philosopher in a formal sense. I sincerely doubt he would ever characterize himself that way. He thought of himself as a journalist. Oh, that we had journalists of his caliber today. Anyway, unfortunately for my reader, who is more into pedigree than I am, they will have to suffer through my attempt to read Chesterton as philosophy. I don't have much choice. Chesterton is extremely interesting to me from a philosophical point of view. I'm an iconodule or an icon lover, and Plato and Chesterton are two of my icons. Neither one is recognized Catholic or Orthodox saint. No matter, they are my philosophical heroes, not necessarily my moral ones. This work is also ironic because irony can be read in many different compatible and incompatible ways. Just like the Platonic corpus, Alfred North Whitehead said, the safest general characterization of the European philosophical tradition is that it consists in a series of footnotes to Plato. Whitehead was by no means a straightforward theist, nor was he a straightforward materialist. He most certainly was a scientist of the highest caliber. If he is respectful enough to actually engage Plato and the Platonic way of doing philosophy, I invite or even employ the atheist reader of this work to do the same. At times, my cheeky approach to the perceived or even actual limitations of materialist and scientistic atheism will rub the atheist the wrong way. It will appear to be mean-spirited. Full disclosure, it may indeed be mean-spirited. However, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. Atheist apologetics are not a walk in the park for the theist either. If the atheist then appeals to the better angels of my nature and says, as a Christian, I have a heavier burden to be charitable, I respond, it's unwise to bring a knife to a gunfight.